Hello and welcome to the Walk Around podcast. If you are in the automotive business, you have found the place to be. I am one of your hosts, Mark Spoto, joined as always by Elliot Schor.
Hey now.
And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Jake Thieves. So Jake, he's a digital media professional who loves to drive. He is the owner of Out Motorsports, which is a community for LGBTQ automotive enthusiasts, and he brings amateur motorsport competitions to that community. He competes wheel to wheel with the National Auto Sports Association in his Spec 3 BMW 325i. On top of that, he's also the president of the Washington Automotive Press Association. So Elliot, Jake's conversation with us was incredibly interesting perspective from a consumer's point of view, as someone who reviews cars. He knows the business. He's a car enthusiast, and he gave us great insight.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it was not what I would thought this podcast would be.
Right.
In a
good way.
In a good way. Not that I thought it would be bad, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And I think Jake really provided some great insights in how to be a dealer can be part of the community.
Absolutely.
And I loved his message around that.
So let's take a walk around with Jake Thieves.
Well, Jake, it is a pleasure to have you on the Walk Around podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Mark, I think this is a monumentous moment.
It is. We always like to point out first.
Yes, for sure.
And this is maybe a first for the Walk Around podcast.
Yeah,
yes?
I think a first in terms of a race car driver.
Race car driver.
Yes, I think it's a first in terms of a true influencer.
True influencer.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've had people that claim to have, but we're not going to call them out.
No, we're going to be polite. But Jake, you are truly, your business is being an influencer and creating a brand, but we'll get to that. Let's start off with some of the fun stuff. You are an actual race car driver. Tell us about how that started and what's that like?
Yeah, I am an actual race car driver, which is something I never thought I would say at, age 18 at the time. I got involved in amateur club racing when I was in college. We had a motorsports club in college, and I got in with them. I've been into cars since I was a little kid, and they brought me to the racetrack with the National Auto Sport Association to help initially work the events, and that led to me buying a car, making it track ready, and eventually doing driving school, and then getting into racing. That's like the 20-second condensed version, but it took a long time.
What I heard before that, though, is you were always interested in cars. Was it
Correct.
Was it race cars? Was it the car business? We're always curious to know what got someone started in this industry. What was it?
I mean, yes, I think all of it is the answer. I think initially it was just wanting to drive, and then, as a kid, my parents would take me to dealerships. We had the Cadillac Grand Prix race that came through DC at one point, so they took me to that when I was like 11. I just wanted to be around things with engines and wheels just since forever. But I think the enthusiasm now is very much on the driving end of it.
It is on the driving end. And so that's like the real, like what we see. We were joking around before this, but F1 has become a huge deal, and we live down in South Florida, and we're fortunate enough to now have the F1 Miami race, which really, it's amazing. We never thought that people would be so into.
It's not even so much about the race anymore. It's more of a social.
It's a soap opera
place to be seen.
Kind of.
It's very much F1, especially with Drive to Survive, has become very, it's all about storytelling. And I think that has gotten a whole group of people into motorsport who otherwise wouldn't follow it, wouldn't care, wouldn't anything. What I find fascinating about my own self-interest is that I follow F1 very tangentially. I would rather be driving the car. I would rather be playing the sport. Like, I don't watch sports and consume that sort of stuff because I would rather be doing it versus watching.
So I sort of assumed you would be all into the F1 drivers and the teams, but you don't immerse yourself in the sport. You'd prefer to be behind the wheel.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a terrible consumer of other pro automotive content.
Interesting. Does the F1 popularity, has that helped in terms of your business? Has it, maybe given an audience to where there wasn't one before?
It's interesting. I think the easiest thing that F1 and the popularity has done for what I do is when I try to explain it to somebody new, someone I meet at work or someone, on a date or whatever. And they're like, well, what do you mean you go racing? Like, what is racing? Because they think NASCAR, like an oval track. And what I can say now is it's like F1, but with cars that used to be road cars, BMWs, Corvettes, Miatas, whatever. We turn both ways. We have elevation changes. That sort of thing. So that paints a really good picture for people. And you can figure out what I and a bunch of my friends do very easily now, which is nice.
So take us back to that first experience where you got behind the wheel, you got a helmet on, you're in a race. This is your first time kind of going out there and doing this thing. What was that like?
So there's a bit of a buildup to it, in that the way we do this whole program is there's driving school, and then, so you're getting used to being on track with other people. And then you do a competition school where you learn how to be door to door with people and go 3 wide through a corner. And, it's all a learning experience. But they tell you when you take your first green flag, you will have, prepared for scenario A, B, and C, and you're going to end up with like scenario H by the time you get to the first one, because everything is different than what you think. It was super cool to do it, and I was terrified. There's, because you're out there with people who've been doing this for years with all this experience. They're comfortable putting their car right next to yours. It just, and you're just like, I just don't want to be in the way, but I want to do well. I don't want to screw up. And so it was a lot of that at first. And what I find interesting, I just returned from a race weekend, and I'm just comfortable now. I'm comfortable sliding the car around. I'm comfortable kind of dive bombing through a corner to get past somebody slower, that sort of stuff. And that just comes with seat time.
It's kind of funny you say that. I once had the opportunity to do a hot lap at Daytona in a stock Toyota Camry. And I was terrified going into that first turn. I mean, and I wasn't driving. I was absolutely terrified. I was going like 90, but for me, I didn't grow up with racing, and I never really, it was actually my first time at a track, and I didn't realize how steep the banks were. And, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and it's like, and it's dizzying. I don't think people realize how steep and how much, gravity is involved in keeping the car on the track.
Yeah. And with those banking, curves, if you want to call them that, whatever, on those turns, a lot of times you end up turning up into it to keep the car where you want it to be. If it's that steep of banking. The racetrack I was just at was Pit Race, which is an hour west of Pittsburgh, and they have a ton of elevation. There's this one turn where you come back up and you have to slow down to, 30, 35 to make it. And you feel the car just struggle. It's just like, okay. And it just slowly builds power, and everybody slows down. You can watch it in videos. It's kind of funny. But yeah, that elevation, if you were to walk that track, you'd be stunned at how steep all those hills are.
Right. It's shocking. Yeah. So you're in college, you're getting involved in racing. So how do you transition that to, where you are now with outmotorsports.com and, in a full-fledged, media company with all sorts of engagement? So how does that pivot happen? When did you see that opportunity, and take us there?
So, initially this all came out of me and a friend who were both getting more into amateur motorsport. And we were kind of looking for a place to document every event we had gone to. It was kind of a way to share with the community, here's what we're doing. You can do it too. You should come join us. And also just to have a log if you're looking to go back for your own reference before, I'm going back to this track again. Well, how was it the last time I was there, sort of thing. So that's what we started, was just a blog. And then COVID really put an emphasis on the fact that there are a lot of other LGBT car enthusiasts looking for community. And they might know of some people online, but it's hard to get people together, as with any group of people. So we started with COVID doing first weekly and then eventually monthly Zoom calls with this community of people that we kind of found. And they tell their friends, it keeps growing and growing. And we realized the community element of this was really huge. And then in there, you know, my big passion obviously is getting people out on track to do motorsports, because I think it makes you a better driver on the street, because I think all of our drivers in the US are very, very poorly trained. You know, if you can fog a mirror, you can get a driver's license. And I think that's a problem. So,
it's
you know,
so
anybody.
Oh my God, is it true?
I mean, I have firsthand knowledge of I have a 16-year-old who's getting his license, and literally in Florida, you don't have to take driver's ed. So, which is crazy. And some of his friends have very little experience getting their license, and it's a little scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, he'll get his license and no one will ever make him do any real kind of training. Right.
Right.
Totally.
So, and I think that's really awful, to be totally honest. So, you know, there's all these programs and groups who do high performance driver training, but a lot of people don't know about them, or they think they're too intimidating to get into, or whatever. So I called up a friend who hosts these events full time, and I said, hey, I want to do my own thing. Will you help me? And we started making a calendar, and it was first just one event for the year. And then we've just been doing more and more of them. But it's a cool and exciting and terrifying thing to have your name down as having rented a whole racetrack.
Wow.
And then you hope people show up.
Wow. So you're doing these events and you're renting out the racetracks so that people can come out. And are you providing the vehicles as well? Or do people? No. So people bring their own cars. Yeah.
Yeah. You can bring almost anything.
Anything. So stock, whatever, you can bring it out. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. We've had, we encourage you to bring just whatever street car you have. We also do a kind of Top Gear style cheap car challenge, because it is timed for like lap time. And people bring some really awful stuff to that, which is great. We've had a spray painted $200 Chrysler Town and Country that I think has been my favorite terrible car. But if you can do motorsport in that, you can do it in anything.
Hey, well, what did I read? Rent a Trailer. The guy who created that website built that into $1 billion business by accident. But but I'm curious. You know, now that you're mentioning this, it kind of, one thing we talk a lot about is the shift over to electric vehicles and how that's happening in the industry. Do you see that happening now on the racetrack? Are people bringing out EVs to go race?
We've seen it with the high performance driver education, which is the stepping stone up to going racing, because you can really bring pretty much anything for that. So we've seen some Teslas, we've seen some other EVs here and there, and then we've seen, hybrids of whatever sort. And you see some kind of higher performance, like exotics and supercars that are hybrids too. You can do it. It can be a little bit of a challenge to get recharged in time for your next session, depending on if the track has chargers. Some of the ones I've gone to do, and it's no big deal. The bigger issue that we've seen is that not every track has the fire safety training currently to handle a battery fire. So some racetracks have got a complete ban on EVs and hybrids. Others have said, we need to know ahead of time if you're bringing one. It's just the rules are kind of different track to track. When it gets to outright wheel-to-wheel racing, we haven't seen them yet, because that's all, there's classing and series that you fit into. And those are all, this is amateur level. They're all based around cars you can buy for $5,000 and build. So, we're a long ways out from that.
So Jake, you identified this need in the LGBTQ community, and you provided this outlet, these events. How has it been going? Have you seen momentum building? Is the membership growing? How do you judge success with this program?
Yeah, I mean, so momentum has been building steadily, and it kind of compounds as you do more and more events. You see more and more things build. We have this whole online membership program, and when you go to the website and go to sign up or log into it, there is a Google map with little pins that if you choose, you can add like your zip code. and you can see all these little red pins all over the map. And I love going every couple months and just seeing how many more pins we have.
How cool.
That's really cool.
It's a tangible thing to look at. And then with the events that we're hosting, we sell out of everything we're hosting, and there's a demand to do these in more parts of the country. And, we're trying to figure out how to best do that for next year in particular.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think it leads us maybe into where we wanted to, get, some your take on, how. So a lot of our audience is dealers or is
in the industry,
owners, general managers, and we talk about marketing, we talk about segments of the population, and a lot of times we talk about them in terms of older and younger, or we talk, and there's a lot of segmentation around that. The younger generation wants more online, the older more inclined to
purchase in store,
right? Mm-hmm. But how do you see dealers reaching out to the LGBTQ community? And do you think there's an opportunity there, in terms of what you do? Do you see good? Do you see bad? Do you see an opportunity?
I do. Yeah. I think, with, like, we're coming off the heels of Pride Month, with being June. And, Pride is obviously a thing that's all year round, but like June is a good time to highlight. In the DC area in particular, what we see is certain dealer groups will participate in the Pride Parade. And then we have kind of this festival where it's, people give out swag the next day and there's live music and whatever. So it's always nice to see certain dealer groups show up and just be visible. And, I think it's one of those things where it doesn't always have to be about the community, if you will, but it's always really nice to see someone show up. And, if I see that a certain dealer group in the DC area has been at Pride or has sponsored some events for the LGBT community, and I see their logo on t-shirts or whatever, I'm not saying I'm only going to shop with them, but it's sure nice to see it, and it'll probably stick in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's a really nice way to put it. I love how you articulated that, in the sense that it's not really about one segment. It's about being part of the community.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if I heard you right, which
dealers have been doing for decades.
There's a great dealer in Miami, that Toyota dealer, famous. I haven't been there in a little while, but when you walk into their store, they have these banners of flags of all across the world. Miami's super international. And they actually had they're famous for a huge Statue of Liberty, this 10-foot replica Statue of Liberty in the showroom. But they had flags, and they have everything from, obviously they have the USA flag, but they have the Brazilian flag, the Argentinian flag, they have the French flag, the Israeli flag, they have, the Egyptian flag. I always walked in and felt welcome in that sense, and I think that's really, it's more about acknowledging the part of the community, and being a part of that,
and being inclusive to the community.
Yeah. And I think that's really, I love that example, because that just sounds festive in a really fun, interesting way, and very of the region. And that is also something that can be up and it's there year round. Because none of this is a, week to week, month to month thing.
Totally.
And it also sounds authentic to that dealer group and that part of the country and that part of the state. So, that's the other thing, is do this in a way that's authentic to you. That's your voice. It's not taking advice from me, the consultant or whatever. Do it in a way that works for you.
That's a great suggestion. I think also it relates to when dealers try to figure out their presence online, right? Mm-hmm. And the biggest suggestion I think we hear is being authentic to who they are, to who their brand is. Would you agree with that, Jake, in terms of developing your online persona or presence as a dealer? Yeah.
And I think that, that applies to any sort of business. I would say not just car dealers, but, my dad is a real estate agent. Several friends are realtors. And I think, you can parlay that into this topic as well, where everyone can do this. You can buy a car from anybody. So show me your personality. Why am I coming to
Totally.
Toyota of Miami or whatever to buy a Camry because I can buy one anywhere? So don't be all, uptight, buttoned up, whatever, because I think it's kind of a turnoff to a lot of people, and they want to know what they're getting before they get there.
That's a good setup, Jake, for something else we wanted to talk to you about. As another part of your life is the Automotive Press Association in the DC area. So you have exposure to, so many different vehicles and manufacturers, and you help create those opportunities with journalists. Talk to us about kind of the car buying experience. You mentioned sort of that stuck up, typical type of approach. What are you seeing as an enthusiast for cars, but also as you talk to some of your colleagues in the process of buying a car?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we have a fairly active group of, I would say, 80 to 90 media members in the DC area that are part of this association. And a lot of us get to work with new vehicles for the sake of review, weekly or monthly or whatever. Those come directly from the manufacturers. So we're not dealing with dealerships for a lot of it. And then we do have some members who have not quite made it there, and they're, how big they are. So they're working with dealerships to get cars and drive those. For the sake of purchasing, I have not purchased a new car since 2018. I'm about to do it. I'm about to do it in a few months, actually. But what I can say is between new and pre-owned, the purchases I've made, I show up as an enthusiast, already educated.
Right.
I had the worst time. I bought several trucks, and I felt like I knew far more than any salesman in the building, which was dangerous because I was looking for more information and they couldn't provide it. But you get to the finance office. It's like, all of us know this is where you make your money. No, I don't want wheel and tire. No, I don't want the extended warranty. I want to get in and get out.
I think there's a message in there.
There is,
right? There's a
education, customer education.
Yes, I think
for all of our customers and partners who are listening to Jake, who does not want to buy the wheel and tire package,
right?
Which are, by the way, the products that we sell.
I mean,
it's all good, but it's fine. It's fine. This is the honesty we need.
This is what we want.
This is the honesty we need. It's important. It's about engaging the customer.
It's also like, listen to your customer. In certain cases, wheel and tire is worth it.
Right.
If you're driving in the middle of DC with our fabulously maintained roads, that's true. And you've got some, new whatever with 22-inch wheels and rubber band tires. Yeah, you might want wheel and tire.
Totally.
The one that irritated me, I've had this happen on several vehicles where I bought either certified pre-owned, or I currently own a diesel Porsche Cayenne that until recently had the Dieselgate extended warranty that was super awesome. In both cases, I had to repeat myself 4 times and say, no, I don't need or want an extended warranty. The car has one. Please stop talking. Bring me my car. Here is my check. You've made this miserable. So that's another thing of listen to your customer. If they say they don't want it, you can try to educate, but if they say no, take them at their word.
Well, and especially if they're saying, I already have the coverage, listen to the words. But, we talk about it all the time. I mean, being helpful, valuing a customer's time. I heard that in there too, in terms of, it's and being helpful, as Mark said, it's those little things. And that's why we love having, because we have a lot of dealers on, and I almost prefaced I almost jumped in. I didn't, to kind of lead the witness a little bit, but I was like, no, let's not do that.
Let's see where this goes.
But we talk to dealers a lot, and there's a feeling that there is progress in the business, and there is progress in the industry towards that direction. And we know it's inconsistent. We know there's 15,000 new car franchise dealers out there. Clearly, they're all doing it a little differently, but But we want to believe that there's progress towards what you're describing. And so in a few months, you got to promise us.
We want to know how it goes.
We could do a little follow-up podcast on the car buying experience. And for all the dealers out there that are listening, that, if you're lucky enough to have Jake in your store at some point in the next few months, right? Let's take his advice here and make sure we put him down the road in a happy outcome.
For sure. Jake, so as someone who's experienced with manufacturers and seeing new product, are there things coming up that are exciting for you and looking forward to reviewing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think we're in a very interesting time with all of the EV efforts. And I struggle to use the term EV because I think the actual term is electrification.
Yeah.
If you read between the lines, everyone's, we're being electrified by 2030. That doesn't mean all EV, it means hybrid.
Totally.
Right.
It's small steps. So people are kind of wigged out about the fact that by 2025, we'll have no gas powered anything, which is not going to happen. And, EVs are good for some people, but I also don't think they're going to take over the world as quickly as some people hope they will. On the flip side of that, some of them are really great and really fun. And then also, I think we're in a really good golden age of gasoline powered enthusiast focused cars. I think we have really gotten to a good peak where engineering has resulted in some really fabulous stuff to drive, and you can find something good across a lot of different price points.
Yeah, it's interesting. Electrification definitely is it's interesting how the manufacturers have shifted and evolved in terms of their words. And there's definitely certain manufacturers that are all in and, gearing towards that. It's like come hell or high water, we will build EVs. And then there's others who I think are taking a much more pragmatic approach to understanding that should be a customer demand driven business. But that's, I think you're right. Is there any, and I'm curious, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there any manufacturers that you're very impressed by, or you're maybe under the radar that you maybe don't, that you've been privy to that, kind of impress you behind the scenes?
I'm trying to think of any one manufacturer that's really hitting it out of the park as far as everything I get to drive, I enjoy. I don't know. I think everybody's got some hits and some misses right now. Yeah. I wouldn't say anybody is just perfect and everything they do is super fantastic. The one who I really have been impressed with because they have a thesis statement, they know what they're doing and they've stuck to it and they don't care if you don't like it, is Lincoln.
Huh.
I was actually having this conversation with a friend the other day.
I did not expect him to say that.
No, I was
because probably as an enthusiast, why do I care about Lincoln? But Lincoln has decided several years ago that they are going to be quiet, calm, luxurious, serene, powerful, but not in a sporty way. They do not care about taking a corner at all. They are, and they're not really even drag race straight line cars. It's power as excess, and that is luxury. And they have committed to the bit of just being really, really nice. And by comparison, I think Cadillac is sort of struggling and has struggled for a while with a brand identity for all of their vehicles.
It's a great point.
That is a great point.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. That's really such an on message because you think back to brands that are sort of just out there and what do they stand for, and having that, and it's really not a matter of what you stand for. It's more a matter of having something to stand for and sticking to it. So, you think about some brands like an Infiniti as an example. Sorry to all of our Infiniti dealers, but they don't
know where they're going right now.
Totally.
Right.
And you could argue that a little bit about several of the luxury OEMs, I think, are in that space. And even some of the non-luxury are kind of trickling into that space.
Jake, would that be your advice, or what would be your advice if you could sit in a room with all of the OEM movers and shakers? What would be your advice to them as someone who has spent a lot of time reviewing vehicles and understanding performance, certainly as a motorsports enthusiast. What would be kind of some recommendations you'd have for the manufacturers?
They're going to hate me for this. Take all the touch screens out of cars. I hate touch screens.
Oh my gosh. That is sacrilege.
And I will get on my soapbox for like 30 seconds. Touch screens are positioned as a high-tech thing.
Yeah.
And they are entirely driven by cost cutting, and it's all Tesla's fault.
Oh boy. I love it.
I mean, that is what it is.
Jake. I mean, don't you love going into the car and just looking at that screen, or is it annoying for you?
I love crashing every time I want to change something while I'm on the highway towing a trailer. It's really fun. I think they're unsafe, and I think they're distracting at night. They're a giant, illuminated mess over here. And it's done because it's cheaper to build and certify for crash than it is to get buttons and switches and toggles and whatever else.
Wow, very interesting.
It's a success of marketing.
We have not heard that on the podcast.
Well,
Elon, of all touch screens.
Yep, I love that.
I hate to say it, Jake, but I don't think anyone is going to follow that advice.
No, they're not. But I can be a curmudgeon over here, and and keep in mind, I own a 2013 Porsche that has like the aircraft style bank of buttons for everything.
Oh, I love those,
which is horrifying to look at.
I used to love the old 80s Saabs. I felt like they had like 75 buttons.
Right, you're like on mission control.
I was like, wow, look at all these buttons. But anyway, I think it's time.
I do think it's time. Jake, you may have heard about this segment. We call it a Schor Thing. Elliot here has some hot takes, probably not as hot as the one about the touchscreen, but
that was pretty spicy.
That was spicy.
Yes, I like it.
That's why we had you on this podcast, Jake. We love it. So Elliot will give you some opinions, and we are going to ask you: is that a Schor thing or not a Schor thing?
All right. So it's an all-time edition of a Schor Thing.
Yes,
we have 3 best of all times, or worst of all times that we're going to talk you through. We do a little research on you, Jake.
No boy.
I'm not going to. I don't want to give this one away because it'll give it away. But
it's one of your prior
employers
companies that you have worked in.
Yeah,
that'll just be a long teaser for you.
And so there's a lot of reasons. These days, mergers are all the rage, right? You see everyone teaming up together, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, though. And Mark and I were very curious about what were the most top failed mergers of all time. And the ones that came to mind for us were Quaker and Snapple.
That is just a match.
That was an amazing,
not made in heaven.
Definitely not. And this was Snapple, the weird brand, right?
And Quaker
was
complete opposite.
Was Quaker, right? And so that one did not work. Sears and Kmart, talk about 2 failing companies with a last-ditch effort. Has to be easily one of the worst of all time. eBay and Skype. Back in the hype days, were that definitely piqued our interest. Daimler, Benz, and Chrysler. I think there's infamous discussions about the German culture and the American culture clashes of who was actually in charge of that merger, but
didn't quite work.
But there's one merger to me that stands out in terms of the absolute biggest debacle and failure of all time, and it's got to be the $350 billion failure that was AOL and Time Warner. Schor thing or not a Schor thing?
Sure thing. That
was. You speak from experience, Jake, perhaps.
Yeah, you mentioned this was a former employer. This was my first employer. I was an intern at AOL, not in their heyday, in their slow decline. And it was a lot of mismanagement from the Time Warner days, where they basically just failed to keep up with where the market was going. And, things tanked very quickly.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Anyone that you know with an AOL email address that they still use, you question them a little bit, right?
Totally. Well, not only that, but it's always fun to think, like, and we're in that generation here, but your first AOL handle name and what you were thinking.
The messenger.
What you were thinking at the time. Oh my gosh.
All right. So you're 1 for 1.
A 1 for 1.
He agreed with you.
I'll take it.
That's good.
Okay.
Good start.
All right. This was a cool one. Being an influencer, Jake, these days a lot of people call themselves influencers, but we kind of went back to the original. We were thinking about, well, who are the greatest influencers of all time?
In the purest definition.
In the purest sense.
Followers.
Now, we ruled out all religious figures from this list, because I think, you can make an argument. We saw some different lists here. Muhammad, Jesus, get it. Super successful influencers. Got it. But we're talking about a more modern influencer.
Yes.
And so, for us, a few names come to mind, The Rock, Ariana Grande, Mr. Beast, Dude Perfect, Selena Gomez, the Biebs, right? Taylor Swift, I think, who's been coming on strong as of late, is probably one of the greatest. Maybe influencer doesn't do her justice in terms of what she does. But it really came down to two people who Mark and I were debating. Mark has his take and I have mine.
Okay.
And so my take, the number one modern influencer of all time, it's got to be Kim Kardashian. I mean, she parlayed, just a genius in terms of what she has parlayed in terms of influence and her ability. Mark, though, had a different hot take.
I did. I went in the sports world. And again, I'm basing it on following. But Ronaldo, the worldwide soccer sensation, has 517 million followers.
That's a lot of followers.
That is influence.
That's more than people in the United States.
That is influence.
So the Schor Thing is...
You're going with Kardashian.
I'm going with Kim as the Schor Thing, the number one influencer of all time. But we want your take, Jake, because you're an influencer. So Schor Thing or not a Schor Thing? Kim Kardashian.
I think the fact that I'm hesitating means that it's a not.
Not a Schor Thing.
Okay. Tell us more.
Because I question if what she's influencing is helpful.
That is a great point. Are you contributing in a positive way to society?
Right.
Good question.
That is a great question.
Like, are you known for something that's helpful to others, or just because of, physical characteristics or kind of surface level things that you're talking about, or something deeper?
What a great point.
Who do you admire as an influencer?
Who would be your influencer top on the list?
I think, I don't know if I would name any one specific person, but I admire people who, they're known for one thing, but they're also focused on something that's got a bigger, greater good to it. There's several people in media in particular. I'm thinking Taylor Swift and RuPaul are the two that come to mind.
Yeah.
Who, their careers have been built on doing a thing with media, whether it's music or TV or whatever. And they both encourage young people in particular to get out and get registered to vote and go vote.
Right.
Because we need people to do that. And I think that's fantastic. So that's kind of where my brain goes is, are you doing something bigger than you?
Could he have been any better?
I was going to say, I feel pretty shallow now. You should. Kardashian,
you should. But Jake, let's remind folks, Elliot's building a little bit of an influencer network himself on LinkedIn. If you are on LinkedIn, make sure you connect with Elliot, because he's growing. He's growing.
A little micro.
Micro
influence.
I believe this is the best response ever for a Schor Thing.
That was a good one. But we got one more.
Let's close out on.
We're going to end on a high note here, but so you talk about racing. We're going to go back to racing, and thinking about the best racing teams of all time. And you could easily say there's all sorts of racing teams, but I guess I'm partial. Obviously Ferrari is legendary, right? In racing, Mercedes, McLaren, Hendrick Motorsports, a NASCAR winning record 297 Cup Series for them. But when I think about the number one, and maybe my ethnocentric American bias will come out in this, but when I think about the number one racing team of all time, it's got to be Shelby Racing, number one racing team of all time.
Shelby Racing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Number one racing team of all time. Schor Thing.
I know you said you're not, you don't follow the sport as closely as maybe we thought, but what's your take there? Schor Thing or not a Schor Thing?
I would agree.
Yes.
Mostly just because I love like the origin story.
Totally.
I don't know if I would say most successful of all time, but I don't know how you define success, but I think the story of how that whole team came to be and where they went is fantastic. And I love a little bit of an underdog. So I think that's kind of how they emerged,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I would agree.
Another great response.
Great response.
Jake, where can people get in touch with you? Those that are interested in getting more involved in Out Motorsports, tell us a little bit about where they can reach out.
Yeah, so we've got a website, which is outmotorsports.com. That's where the membership is based out of. We've got car reviews. We've got events that we're hosting that are all listed on there. And then we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. So
awesome.
Go give us a follow everywhere over there too.
Fantastic. Jake, a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, that was a pleasure.
Yeah, this was so much fun.
Can't thank you enough. And we will be sure to check you out online. And
good luck with that car purchase.
Good luck. Let us know what you buy. And we also want to sell you a service contract.
Fantastic.
But definitely no wheel and tire.
Yes. No, I might need wheel and tire on this one. I'm keeping it a secret till I buy it, but we'll see.
All right, cool.
Take care.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for listening to us on The Walk Around. This podcast is produced by the team at the JM&A Group. Special thanks to Caitlin Swanson, James Gahn, and Michaela Gerritsen for helping us produce this episode and others. If you're a dealer owner, if you're a general manager, regardless of your career in automotive, you are sure to pick up some insights on The Walk Around.
I like what you did there.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's nice. And we appreciate all of our listeners. You can find us anywhere where you can find podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We're on YouTube, Spotify video now available. All you got to do, if you have an Alexa-enabled device, you could just say, Alexa, play The Walk Around, and it will play. So we appreciate you. Remember to go ahead and subscribe. Thank you for listening.